from Luke chapter 19, and it is exactly that. It's the story of Zacchaeus. All right, Zacchaeus and the tax collector. And we don't need to leave children. Children are okay. Children can be loud. That's acceptable today. All days. All days. It happens all the time. Yeah. What's different? Nothing's different. It's acceptable. All right. So this is the story of Zacchaeus from Luke chapter 19. So Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and he climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and he said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." And so he came down at once, and he welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this, and they began to mutter, "He is gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up, and he said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." And Jesus said to him, "Salvation has come to this house today, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." As we read the story of Zacchaeus, and as we come to understand what's going on with Zacchaeus, it's important to understand that Zacchaeus was somebody who was on the outside of the community. Zacchaeus was not an insider, he was an outsider. And Zacchaeus was an outsider because of his job, because of what he did. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. And the way that tax collectors in that day and in that age, the way that they made their living was if you owed $100 in taxes, they would come and they would collect $150. If you owed $200, they would come and they would collect $350. And they would pay what you owed, and then everything else they got to keep. And so the tax collector was viewed and understood to be a cheat, and was viewed and was understood to be somebody who was making their living cheating the rest of the community. And so Zacchaeus was somebody who was an outsider in the world, and people did not look highly upon him because of what he did and because of who he was. And so when Zacchaeus heard that Jesus was coming, Zacchaeus was looking for healing. Zacchaeus was looking for renewal. Zacchaeus was looking for some kind of transformation in his life. I don't know if you've ever lived as an outsider somewhere. Have you ever been an outsider? Whether you've been in a place where, at work, where there's the in-group and then there's the out-group. Maybe it was high school, junior high school. Maybe it's family, But we all, at different times and different places, we have sat in that place of the outsider. And it's not a good place to be. It's not healthy. It doesn't feel good. We want to escape that. And Zacchaeus is his whole being, his whole life, everywhere he goes. When he goes to the store, people look and they understand and they see, there he is. And he's the outsider. People are looking, people are seeing him in that way. His own family is viewing him that way. And he's looking for healing from that. And there's just this glimmer of hope that maybe this Jesus can offer that to him. And so he wants to see Jesus. He wants to have some kind of interaction with Jesus, and he shows up where Jesus is going to be. He understands Jesus is coming this way, and so he's going to get there, and he's going to see Jesus. But there's already a crowd of people who view him as the outsider. They're not going to make way for him. They're not going to let him come forward. They're not going to help him see Jesus. So the very best he can do is to get in the back and climb a tree and to be able to look and to see, hoping to catch a glimpse of this Jesus who may be able to set him free. And when Jesus comes, Jesus stops at his tree. Jesus doesn't glad hand everybody else who's there. Jesus doesn't hang out with the rich and the famous. Jesus doesn't hang out with the popular and the well-connected. Jesus stops at the tree of Zacchaeus and begins to have a conversation with Zacchaeus. And everybody else, people begin to think, well, there he goes again, talking to the sinners. Doesn't he understand who that person is? Doesn't he understand how far away they are from the kingdom of God? Doesn't he understand how out of the community they are? Doesn't Jesus understand that he shouldn't be talking to those people because you know what could happen? A little bit of them could rub off on him, and that might not be a good thing for him. You know, Jesus doesn't care. What he's focused on is Zacchaeus. And he says to Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus, come out of that tree. Because beyond having this conversation, I'm coming to your house. And you and I are going to have dinner together. There's going to be fellowship. There's going to be communion. We are going to be sitting around the table, and I want to know you more, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to know me more. And in that relationship, Zacchaeus, you are going to be set free. Zacchaeus, there's a whole line of people around here who want me to come to their house. There's a whole line of people who want to have this one-on-one time with me. But Zacchaeus, it's not happening with them. I choose you to be in relationship with. And one of the things that just overwhelms me about this story is the way in which Zacchaeus responds. Zacchaeus responds and he says, I am going to give half of all I own to the poor. I'm going to give immediately half of all I own to the poor. Okay, that's one thing. And then he says, if I have cheated anybody, then I'm going to pay back 4 times what I've cheated them. You're a mathematician. Yeah, stand up for a minute. Help me out for a minute, okay? We'll keep it easy. I'll keep the math easy, okay? So take a look here. So if I'm Zacchaeus and I've cheated, let's just say there's 100 people here. We're going to flip it. We'll keep it easy. And I cheated these people $100 each. That means I have to pay back 10. Yeah, I'm asking you. I'm asking you to do the math for me. Yeah, that's 10,000. Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right. So I've cheated and I've taken in 1,000, and I'm going to pay back 10,000. Wait. Zacchaeus, I'm giving half of all I own to the poor, and then I've taken in this amount, but now I am paying all of this back. Zacchaeus is heading towards poverty, right? What once was wealth in his world, he's heading towards poverty, and he's doing it with joy. He's doing it with joy, and he's doing it with a sense of happiness because he's found something of greater value. Because he's found something of greater value, and what is it that he has found? Who is it that he has found? It's Jesus. He's found somebody that looks at him and says, you are of value and you are of worth. You are created in the image of God. You are loved. not because of what you do, not because of what you've done, but simply because of who you are as a being, Zacchaeus. And I forgive you for what has been done, and Zacchaeus, I set you free from all of that. Now, Zacchaeus, let's go have a meal together, and now I set you free to live life to the fullest. I was on retreat this past week, and I came across this definition of prayer, which I wish I had found this decades ago. But Henry Nouwen talks about prayer, and he says that prayer is the intentional, concentrated, regular effort to create space for God. To create space for God. That's what prayer is. It's all about creating space for God to do what only God can do in my life. When Zacchaeus climbed that tree, what he was doing was creating space and being there for Jesus to do what only Jesus could do in his life. And as we read that story, there's times, I don't know if you react this way to that story, but I do. I wish I could climb a sycamore tree somewhere and have this encounter with Jesus the way that Zacchaeus did. But the truth is, I can't, because Jesus doesn't walk the face of the earth the way that he did all those years ago. But what I can do, and what we are called to do, is to create space for God in our lives. To create times of stillness and of quiet, to remove distraction. At times, whenever we don't know exactly what to pray for, to simply say, God, I am here. God, I'm listening. I want to hear you speak to me. God, what do you have to say to me? And in that effort, where you and I create space for God, we're like Zacchaeus. We're climbing up on top of a sycamore tree, and we're looking. We're looking and we're waiting for Jesus to come walking on by. And we're waiting to hear what God has to say to us. What Jesus has to say to us. When Jesus says, Dan, come down out of that tree. I want to spend time with you. When Jesus looks and says, Betty, I love you, I care for you, you are my daughter, you are blessed, let's spend some time together. And God wants to speak like that to each and every one of us. And the challenge is for us to be like Zacchaeus and to create that space. Now, I can't tell you, right, exactly what that looks like in your life, because each of our lives are different. Each of our lives are different, and the cares and the worries of my world are different than the cares and the worries of your world. And the cares and the worries of your world are different than the cares and the worries of the person who's sitting next to you. But what we each can do is that we can pursue that creating of space in our lives each and every day so that we can hear the voice of God, so that we can hear Jesus speak and say, I want to be in a relationship with you. I love this story. It's a special story. And I pray that in the days ahead, that God will remind you of it, that God will remind you of Zacchaeus. And whenever he does, that it will kind of trigger this thought in your mind where you will ask the question, God, where am I creating space for you? God, help me create space for you amidst the busyness that is my world. At this time, I'm going to invite Chris and Nick to come forward. And Chris and Nick are they're leaving tomorrow to travel to Togo, Africa. There's an insert in your bulletin about that. And it's been a 3-year journey. for us to, as a community, to think about and develop this relationship with a pastor and his family in Togo, Africa. And Chris and Nick are leaving on Monday afternoon to fly down there and spend about 10 days with this family and to explore and to think about and to talk about their ministry and to learn and to connect with American Baptist ministry and mission in Togo. And very excited for them and for that opportunity. And so before they leave, I thought it would be good for us to spend a moment and offer a blessing upon their journey.